Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Confident at Work podcast. I am your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning, and today we're going to be talking about how you can change your brain. So, obviously, I do change work with people, right? They come to me and say, I don't feel so confident at work. I want to. Can you help me? And I say, potentially, yes, I can. And of course, going from feeling less confident to feeling more confident requires change. Now, most of the time when people come to me, they have no clue how on earth I'm going to help them because something as intangible as confidence, people are like, what? How do you even change that? Maybe I'm just born with it. Maybe that's the way I am. Maybe I'm just an introvert. Maybe this, maybe that. It's like, oh, or maybe I've had this terrible experience in the past. And since then, I haven't been confident. Well, I'm always banging on about how change actually happens in the brain because I think it helps you when you understand it. It helps you to see that it is evidence based, it's research based, it is possible. And if we can get your conscious brain on board, then you're more likely to be open and receptive to thinking, oh, well, maybe I could change my level of confidence or whatever it is you want to change at work. And therefore, you're probably more likely to think, oh, I wonder how I could do that. And then you're more likely to actually try and find a way of doing that. And then you're more likely to actually take the time, energy, and the focus that you need to do it. So, it's good for lots of reasons. And today, because we're talking about how you can change your brain, we're going to talk about neuroplasticity, which is also called neural plasticity, basically the same thing. So, neuroplasticity refers to your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout your life. And this process allows your brain to adapt and change in response to experiences, learning, and environmental influences. And there's this little video on YouTube, which I love, from an organization called Prentice. And it's just a little, like, couple of minutes. And they talk about how neuroplasticity works. And I love their little video. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes so you can go and have a look at it. But basically, I love the spiel that they give. And that sort of goes that not so long ago, many scientists actually believed that our brain didn't really change after childhood. They thought that it was then hardwired, and by the time we became adults, basically it was fixed and it couldn't change. But we now know that that's not true. The brain can and it does change throughout our lives. And this idea that the brain is adaptable, like plastic, is where the term neuroplasticity comes from. And they recommend that you think of your brain, and I love this visual, as a dynamic connected power grid. And within that power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads, and those pathways or roads light up every time you think, feel, or do something. And some of those roads are very well traveled. Think about the habits, the things that you do unconsciously every single day. You do not have to bring your conscious awareness and make a decision about whether or not you do them, right? You just do them. That's because these neural pathways are very well traveled. These are established ways of doing things. And that might be an established habit or a pattern. It might be an established way of thinking. It might be an established way of feeling associated with something. It might be an established way of doing something. And every time that we practice a particular task or we feel a certain emotion in a certain situation, we strengthen those pathways, we strengthen those roads within our brain. And it becomes easier then for our brains to travel along that pathway. And they know this because in neuroscience, they can see that when you use a particular neural pathway, it gets covered in a substance which they call myelin, which is like a fatty sort of tissue. And that fatty tissue sort of insulates, imagine it insulates that neural pathway. And that insulation, that myelin, helps your brain to use that pathway more effectively so that you can travel that road even faster. So once you've got a nice ingrained habit, it's going to be that neural pathway is going to be nicely covered in myelin, that fatty tissue. And that allows your brain to just whoosh, use that pathway lightning fast, really before you've ever had a chance to notice. And every time you're thinking a certain way, or you're practicing a particular task, or you're feeling a certain emotion, as I said, you're going to strengthen that road. And it becomes easier and easier for your brain to travel that road. So let's say you want to change something. And that requires your brain to carve out a new road. So a new neural pathway. So let's say you want to think about something differently, or you want to learn a new task, or you don't want to feel panic every time you perform a certain task at work, right? You'd like to feel a different emotion. Your brain's already got an established pathway that it's been using. So, in order to do something new, your brain has to start to carve out a new road, a new pathway. And if you keep traveling that road, if you keep using that neural pathway intentionally, your brain's going to use that pathway more. And that new way of thinking or feeling or doing something is going to become second nature. And once that old pathway gets used less and less, it's actually going to weaken. So the process of rewiring your brain by forming those new connections and by weakening the old ones is basically neuroplasticity in action. And the great news is that all of us have the ability to learn and to change. And our brains have this capacity for change. And think about it. Actually, you know this because you've changed a habit, right? Before, you've thought about something differently before, you've changed the way you feel about something or someone. When you've done those things, that is neuroplasticity in action. You've carved a new pathway in your brain, or you've created one. And then you know that you've experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. So even if you're listening to this for the first time and thinking, oh, I didn't really know that as a word or as a concept, I'm just inviting you to think about the fact that you already know that your brain can and does do this all the time. Think about a stupid example. Someone was saying to me the other day, oh, they got this coffee machine. My friend Teresa said, I got this new coffee machine and it's an absolute nightmare. Can't use it, can't figure it out, don't know what I'm doing with it. But she wanted to persevere because she'd heard that she was going to have really great coffee at home. And so I was like, all right, so what are you going to do? And she was like, I'm going to make a coffee for myself every single morning, whether it kills me. She was like, I'm going to get the instructions out, I'm going to follow them, and I'm gonna make it happen. And I was like, okay, cool. I look forward to coming to your house in a month and drinking coffee. And you know as well as I know that if Teresa applies herself to figuring out that new coffee machine, because it cannot be beyond the wit of man, right? And it certainly won't be on the wit of her. She's an intelligent woman. She is going to figure out in the end how to make coffee using that machine. And once she has figured it out, that neural pathway that she's developed is going to become so well trodden that she's going to be able to do it easily and without much thought. That neural pathway that she's created is going to get covered in myelin, and it's going to be easy, super easy for her to do the coffee, so much so that she'll be able to do it when she's still half asleep in the morning. And you know through many things that you've changed or learned or done as an adult that your brain has this facility, has this capacity to change. Maybe now you have the words for it. You know, oh, well, that's just my neuroplasticity in action. I'm going to love it when someone reports that back to me. if they ever do. But you already know your brain has this capacity to change. And now maybe you just have the word for it. So you can rewire your brain. And when I'm saying rewire, right, that's a metaphor for what's happening in your brain for those creation of new neural pathways. And basically, when I'm working with a client, I believe in their capacity to change, number one. But number two, I also know that it's possible for them to because of this concept of neuroplasticity. So I don't wonder whether or not my client's going to be able to change. I know that they're capable of it because their brain just is capable of it. Does that mean it's going to be completely easy? No, not necessarily. But I know that if we together look at the pathways that are already there, look at carving new pathways, and I'm help my client to repeat those new habits, repeat those new behaviors, repeat those new ways of doing things with directed attention towards that desired change that they want, their brain's going to work in the same way as everyone else's does, and they are going to change. And of course, this is really important in a professional development context. There are loads of moments in your work life where you want to change something, where you want to learn something, where you want to experience a different way of doing things. So I've just got 3 examples here of how neuroplasticity can support you at work. And the first one is through skill development. So basically, neuroplasticity enables you to learn new skills and improve the ones that you can already do. So improve existing skills. So when you're engaging in a task that is going to challenge you, your brain is forming new neural pathways and it's strengthening the connections related to that skill. For example, let's say you're learning how to use a new software product within your work. And you know that is going to be a pain in the ass at the beginning, but you also know that with consistent practice, you're going to increase your proficiency. And the way that that's happening is you're doing consistent practice, and that's leading to neural adaptations that are enhancing your proficiency. So just know if you're doing something where you're trying to learn a new skill or you're trying to improve a skill, just know that your brain is perfectly wired to help you to do that. That is the joy of being a human. You can direct that capacity that your brain already has to change towards a desired change that you actually want. So let's say you want to improve a skill. You have got the ability to do that. And as your skills improve, you're probably going to feel more confident in using those skills, right? You're probably going to feel more confident in your ability to tackle a new thing again because you're like, well, I managed to make that one work, so maybe I can make this one work too. Here's a recent example from my own life. I have just trained to be a hypnotist, and do I want to go off on a small tangent telling you about this? Maybe. So there are very specific things that I find coaching is helpful, but it doesn't solve the problem to the degree that I want with my clients. So I'll give you an example of when somebody is presenting and they feel that kind of instant like panic response, and you may know that feeling. Coaching is really supportive and helpful. However, that instantaneous physiological response that happens, I think that coaching has a limit in relation to that. And I wanted to find other ways of supporting clients with it because I help people with that stuff all the time. And I found that hypnosis and using kind of trance and metaphors and the language of the unconscious mind and having people in this really nice, like trancey state in order to give them awareness or give them clarity or help them to allow them to think about how they could control parts of their unconscious mind that is creating, some of this physiological response, and that they could have control over it and power over it. That seems to work way better in hypnosis than any other type of change work that I've found for clients. And believe me, I have done the work in the last few years on that kind of thing. So anyway, back to the original point. I've been studying hypnosis, and when you first start doing something, right, you're so aware of how crap you are at it. And I was like that with hypnosis. I was like, I don't understand this. I can't remember what I'm supposed to be saying. I've got this person in front of me that I'm practicing with, and I know there's something I'm supposed to be doing, but I have no idea what it is. And I knew at the beginning that I was going to be consciously incompetent, as they say. But I also knew in the back of my mind, which is a funny phrase, but it's kind of applicable here, that my brain has the capacity to change. And if I keep at what I'm doing, if I keep at my reading, my learning, my note taking, my listening to my teacher, my asking for clarification, my supervision, my practice sessions with clients, my reflection, I know that if I do all of that, my skills are going to improve. And I know that one day I'm going to become a really good hypnotist. And part of the reason that I have the confidence for that is because I've become a really good coach. And I used to be crap at coaching because I'd never done it before. So I've got the confidence that I can develop a skill just like you can, because I've developed a skill before, just like you have. But I also know about neuroplasticity. And I find that really helpful because I'm like, well, if I keep at it, my neural pathways are going to be created. That myelin's going to be forming somewhere, please God, in my mind to make this thing easier for me. And it's the same for you. So if you're doing skill development or skill improvement, any skill that you are wanting to practice or improve on, neuroplasticity is going to be the thing that helps you. The second thing of how neuroplasticity is going to help you at work is around overcoming challenges. So neuroplasticity is allowing you to adapt the way you respond in particular situations. So let's say you're faced with a difficult situation and you're handling it in one particular way. An example is, let's say you have a particular meeting every week, and every week you find that meeting incredibly frustrating. And because you're frustrated, you like check out. You just think, oh God, what is the point in this? Whatever. I'm not even going to listen to these people. I'm not even going to share my opinion. Right? That might not be creating the result that you want. It's a challenging situation and your default is to check out. Well, that is a neural pathway. That is like a habitual pathway which has been created, and at this point might have some nice fatty myelin tissue around it, where the trigger situation is, I'm in this meeting and I find the situation to be frustrating, and so I check out. Now, you have the capacity to change that response if you want to. So when I'm working with a client around something like that, I know that they can change because I know that they have this capacity within their brain, this neuroplasticity. And I'm going to want to know, like, how do you want this to be different? What would you actually like to have happen? And let's say the person says to me, well, I can't really control this meeting because it's way above my pay grade. Maybe I can make some suggestions for improvement, but I can't really control it. But what I would like to be able to do is actually stay online and keep suggesting, keep contributing, right? Rather than just checking out, which is what I'm doing now, because frankly, it's not really helping anyone. So I think, okay, no, one, I know the client has the capacity to change. Two, they know what their desired change is. They want to be able to stay engaged, stay online, and stay contributing. And I know that if they take deliberate and repeated practice towards that, they are going to get their desired result. I also know that there is a thinking and feeling combo, this combo deal, which is creating this frustration in this particular setting. So I'm also going to be working with my client to kind of knock that out if I can, and if it's appropriate, and if they want to, and maybe get them to look at something differently so that they can see it differently and feel differently about it. And all of that change requires neuroplasticity. The third way, which I think it can help you, is around, I don't have a better way of putting this, and this is a bit of a cheesy way of saying it, but like positive self-perception. So neuroplasticity has got a role in shaping your self-perception and your confidence levels. And one of those ways is like what we talked about in number one, which was skill development. So as you increase in your proficiency at a certain task, let's say, you may become more confident at it. Brilliant. However, one of the things that I help people with every single day in which I'm coaching is situations where they already have the proficiency, they can already do the skill, they still don't feel confident about it. And in that situation, there are often a few things going on that I need the client to be aware of. So I coached someone on Friday last week, and they were in a position, which many people are who I work with, where they are going into like it is a presentation, but it's like a panel and a Q&A type thing. Now, these seem to particularly freak people out because they have no idea what they're going to get asked. And even though my clients are experienced professionals who are experts in their area, and that is why they've been asked to come on the panel in the first place, they suddenly freak out in the situation and think, oh my God, what am I doing? They're going to ask me questions I'm not going to know the answer to. Am I going to ruin my reputation? Like, they have all of this stuff going in their mind, right? And of course, that freaks them out. And it leads them to feeling not confident at all. Well, I know that for my clients who've been in a situation like that before, or even if they've never been in a situation like that before, I know that in their mind, they're imagining what that situation is going to be like. And they've replayed these terrible scenarios in their head, which lead them to panic and dread and either like swallowing 20 textbooks in an effort to know everything, or just completely ignoring it and hoping that it's going to go away, even though they know that it's not. Now, in situations like that, neuroplasticity is having an impact on, no, let me say it like this. Your current neural pathways, your current neural networks are having an impact on how you feel when you think about that particular event. So let's say you're the one who's going to present at a panel and you're going to be on the panel for Q&A and there's going to be 200 people in front of you. You're thinking a certain way about that, and you might have certain inbuilt neural pathways that are already going to tell you how you're going to respond in a situation like that. And your neural pathway might be Q&A, panic. That's your neural pathway, because every time you do a Q&A, you panic. That's just what you do. And there's certain other like physiological reasons for this, right? Humans have that stress response when they're dealing with danger, etc. But we remember that these situations are not actually very dangerous. We just think that they are. Now, some of the habits that my clients have are creating panic. And they may not even know what these habits are. They don't even know what is within those neural networks. But we have to find that out to find out why this is freaking them out so much. And as we ask questions, we're going to uncover what is it that is within this client's mind, which is creating this kind of panic response to this Q&A panel thing. And what we usually find out is that they've got a few very particular habits which are creating a problem. One of them is usually that they have a habit of telling themselves that they're an idiot and that they don't know anything. Right? They have a habit of expecting perfection from themselves, even if it's first time. Great. They have a habit of telling themselves they have to know everything perfectly, otherwise they're just a piece of shit and they don't know their job and they're going to lose their job and no one's going to trust them anymore. Right? They are established beliefs, patterns of thinking, which they have unconsciously adopted. And all of those patterns of thinking are running on these networks all over their brain and creating, as you might imagine, panic. So, one of the things that we have to do is find out what those habits, those patterns of thinking are, and knock them out one by one. And then we need to upload or we need to create new habits instead. We want a new habit road. We want a new neural pathway, which says something slightly different. So maybe my first neural pathway that I'm going to practice is this. When I'm on my way to a Q&A or when I know I'm going to be doing one, I may notice that my brain starts kicking out the idea that if I have even one wrong answer to the question, that I'm going to lose my career and I'm going to end up as a bag lady. I will want to practice with my client through repeated directed intention a new way of thinking about this situation. Because the way they're thinking about it now ain't helping them. Plus, it's not even true. If they don't know an answer to a question, they can just tell somebody, oh, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about it like that before. I'd like to give it some thought. I will come back to you. Can you please leave your details? It may be that even that would lead to a better outcome where they're going to, make a personal relationship with somebody. But of course, they're not thinking that. They're just thinking in their old habit pathway. They're just thinking and using their old neural network to just do its thing. Right? So let's say that's their habit of thinking. We want to give them a new way of thinking. Or really, I want them to create a new way of thinking for themselves. And I want them to practice that. I want them to repeat that until that just feels true to them. If I talk to that client again in a year and they're doing a Q&A, I don't want to hear them saying, oh God, I'm going to lose my reputation if I get the wrong answer. No, I want that client to now have replaced a new way of thinking with that old way of thinking. So if I say to a client, oh, how are you feeling about that Q&A? They're like, oh, well, all right. And I'll say, well, what if somebody asks you a question you're not sure about? They'll say, well, it's happened before. It's probably going to happen again. I'll just tell them that that's a really interesting question. I'd love to think more about it. Right? You imagine how that thought doesn't create as much panic as the one before? There are so many habits that we have which are, frankly, alarming from a confidence perspective, extremely unhelpful, making our lives very, very, very difficult. But it's good to know that those habits, those patterns of thinking, those beliefs that are creating maybe a result which is crumbling your confidence rather than building it can be changed. And they can be changed because you're a normal human with a normal human brain and plasticity works. And if you don't believe me, just Google it and look at the science. There's loads. It's very well established. So, how do you actually harness neuroplasticity? Because your brain is doing things all the time anyway, of its own volition, right? Outside of your conscious awareness. But if, let's say, you're thinking, well, I've got a habit, or I've got something that I would like to, I've got a skill that I'd really like to develop, or I've got a habit or a way of thinking that I might quite like to change. Let's say I consistently doubt myself about whether I've got the ability to do something, even though I know I actually have. Maybe that's a habit you might want to change. Maybe that would be good for your confidence. Who knows? Anyway, let's say you want to change that. The fact that you're consistently doubting yourself every time you get a new piece of work. You're thinking, oh God, I probably won't be able to do this. Probably going to be crap at this. Oh God, right? You know what the trigger is? The trigger is a new piece of work. And the neural pathway looks something like, oh, the way I currently think about new pieces of work is that I probably won't be able to do them, and I doubt my own ability, and I don't know whether I'll be able to make a good job, right? All of this. You kind of know that. Just you want to become aware of the situation. You want to become aware of the way you're sort of approaching it now, the way you're thinking about it now. And the more you can get into, okay, how am I actually doing that? Just be very curious. Be like, how am I actually creating a situation where I think I'm going to be crap at new pieces of work every single time? And you might say, well, how I'm creating that is I sort of squint my eyes up And I tell myself, oh God, you're not going to be able to do that. And that leads me to feel this awful doubt. And that leads me to push that piece of work to the side of my desk when I know I should be getting on with it. That's how I'm doing it. Okay, great. That's how you're doing it right now. Then decide, how do I want to be doing this? What would I like to have happen? And if you've ever coached with me, you know that I've been asking you all these questions in the background. Now you know why. I am trying to elicit a change to help you to create a new neural pathway that once it's wired in, we can get some nice fatty tissue around it, and then you can just use it and you can forget about it and you never need to think about it again. So in this example, I'm going to ask you, how would you like to respond when there's a new piece of work coming your way? And you might say, well, I'd like to think, oh, okay, this is new. Right, gonna give this a go. You'd like to feel, or you might say, well, open, fairly neutral, even maybe curious about what's it going to be like? How am I going to do it? Okay, yeah. And that's going to help me to actually get on with it and do it and practice that skill until I can become proficient at it. Great. So I'm going to help you to create a new way of thinking about something. And I'm going to be arming you at every stage with things like evidence for how you've done it before, and with things like evidence of your achievements and the things that you've already done. And I'm going to arm you with all of the things that you're currently doing, which are making it harder, so that your brain can step in and try and stop them. Right? Remember, we said when we stop using a neural pathway, eventually our brain's going to prune it. So this is just all basic stuff of change work. But some of the time, I guess the work that I do, it maybe seems like a bit of a mystery. And it really isn't a mystery. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea. You want to know what's happening right now. What would I like to be happening instead? And then you want to deliberately and repeatedly practice the new thing, whether that's doing something, thinking something, feeling something. I'm making this sound really easy. Okay, some of it is not always that easy, but some of it is. Some of this stuff you don't need to pay me. You can just do it on your own. Some of it maybe you do need to pay me, but it's for a different day. So repeated, directive, intentional practice towards the outcome you want will create new neural pathways. And when you create them and you use them and you use them and you keep using them and you stop using the old ones will be pruned away and the new ones will be strengthened. And every time you use them, they'll be strengthened again. And every time you keep using them, the myelin fatty tissue will wrap around them and it will make them easier and easier for your brain to use them. And remember, your brain loves efficiency like nothing else. So it's just going to be efficient. And it's just going to use the one that it can use the easiest. So let's be intentional. If there's something which you want to change, be intentional about the awareness of the thing that you want to change, but be intentional about remembering that neuroplasticity is working all the time and it could be working in your favor. And anytime you doubt that, just go to Google and start looking at the research around neuroplasticity. And anytime you doubt that, just make a list of things that you've done in your life differently. Make a list of things that you've changed. You didn't used to know how to get from your house to your office. You do now, right? All of these things you have learned to do. You have a nice neural network or a nice neural pathway which represents all of that. Some of them are just running in the background beautifully and you do not want to change them at all. Some of them are running in the background and they are causing you a massive pain in the ass. Some of them are running in the background and they are playing havoc with your confidence. But you can harness neuroplasticity to change habits, thoughts, emotions, skills, competencies at work. And if you want to work with me, and if you want me to help you to do that, you're very welcome to click the link in the show notes, book a call, and ask me about coaching. It may be that you're thinking, yeah, there's kind of a few neural pathways that maybe I need to change. All right, I'm happy to hear about what your challenges are and tell you how I think we can make a change. The other way that you may join us is within the members club. This one is for women only. And I noticed today that 14% of my listeners are men. So hello, men. And I think 3% were non-binary or other. So hello to my non-binary and other gender pals. And of course, hello to my biggest percentage, which are the women. I got a special heart for the women. And you are invited to come and join us in the members club, which is a new thing. And we have our first call on the 13th of May, 2024. So if you're listening to this in the future, hopefully the members club is still running. I will leave a link in the show notes so you can check it out. It's designed to be like, my vision of it is a place where you go for your ongoing support, sustaining, strengthening for your work brain. It's a place where you can just bring all your challenges, get coaching on them, get training on them, and then go back into your workday, into your career. And I'm not great with the tagline, but I thought, it'd be nice to have one. And the tagline for the members club is something like, we've got your back for everything your career and your brain throws at you. And I like that, because the careers that we have are full of challenges. They're full of ups, they're full of downs. Sometimes they're full of confidence crises. Sometimes they're not. And I wanted to create a place where I'm there all the time for you, to support you and to strengthen you and sustain you through all of that. So you can join for a quarter on a quarterly subscription basis, or you can buy a yearly pass. And we would love to have you. So that is all for today's episode. I hope I have convinced you on neuroplasticity. Okay, this episode was slightly longer than normal, and now I'm going to go out and enjoy the sun, because it's finally spring in the UK. I don't know what the season is in the place where you are, because I was looking at the podcast data the other day and I see you people from all over the world. Turns out that everybody who listened to the podcast about assertiveness was in Australia, so that's interesting. And not everyone, but a lot of people. And yes, there was another one which most people listen to were in Ireland. I was like, okay, hello everybody from all over the world. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm delighted to have you as a podcast listener. I never know really who's listening to the podcast. And I'm aware that I might be in your car with you. I might be on a walk with you. I might be, blasting out some speakers while you're doing your cleaning. Wherever we are together, that is, I think that's quite special. That means something to me. And even though I may not know you by name, I hope that I know something of your brain. Because if you're one of my people, I know you and I know how your brain works. And so that should be the end of the babbling for today. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in next week's episode. Bye.